There's a piece of Top Gun 3 news that keeps getting buried under the Kosinski headline, and honestly, it's the part that should worry fans more. Everybody's already moved past Joseph Kosinski stepping away from the director's chair and started assuming Christopher McQuarrie slides in as the obvious replacement. Except a report out of the Insider in early May throws cold water on that entire assumption, claiming McQuarrie isn't even being seriously considered right now. The alleged reason behind that snub says a lot about where Tom Cruise's head is at these days, and once you know it, it recalibrates how you should be thinking about this whole project. So stick around, because we're going deep on this one. Before diving into that, it helps to remember exactly how much weight this franchise is carrying into a threequel. Maverick pulled off something close to a miracle for the industry, crossing roughly $1.5 billion at the global box office against a production budget in the neighborhood of $170 million, picking up a Best Picture nomination along the way, and by most accounts becoming the film Steven Spielberg singled out for personally thanking Cruise over at the 2023 Oscars luncheon, crediting it with helping pull theatrical moviegoing back from the brink after the pandemic gutted the industry. Fans waited 36 years between the original film and Maverick. A third installment showing up this fast by comparison is a little unusual, and in a business where rushed sequels tend to disappoint, that pace alone is worth raising an eyebrow at. What we actually know for certain right now is fairly thin. Paramount's co-head of film, Josh Greenstein, used the CinemaCon stage in Las Vegas this past April to confirm Top Gun 3 exists as an active project, telling a room full of theater owners that a script is already taking shape and that both Cruise and longtime producer Jerry Bruckheimer are on board again. Cruise skipped the trip himself and sent a taped segment instead, shot by director John M. Chu up on the roof of Paramount's famous water tower, closing out a highlight reel of the studio's biggest hits with a quick nod toward brighter days ahead. Nothing beyond that surfaced. No teaser footage, no target date, nothing. Just Paramount putting a stake in the ground and telling everyone its most valuable modern franchise has a pulse again. The groundwork for this actually stretches back further than that stage appearance. The Hollywood Reporter had already broken the news in January of 2024 that Paramount was quietly setting the third film in motion, bringing back Maverick's own Aaron Kruger to handle the script. A logical call given how much of Maverick's emotional weight he helped build alongside fellow credited writers Eric Warren Singer and McQuarrie. Then, in a May 2025 appearance on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast with host Josh Horowitz, McQuarrie revealed he'd had a hand in shaping the story too, explaining that once Kruger pitched him the central idea, the whole shape of the movie fell into place almost immediately. That tracks with what McQuarrie has said plenty of times before, that cracking a concept was rarely the hard part on these movies, the execution always was, and that audiences never respond to the jets themselves so much as whatever's happening emotionally underneath them. Considering McQuarrie and Cruise have now collaborated on more than 10 projects together, 5 of them Mission Impossible films plus Maverick itself, that kind of endorsement isn't nothing. So here's what actually pushed Kosinski out, and it comes down to a scheduling conflict more than any creative falling out, according to a string of reports that started with World of Real in late April and got echoed across the trades leading into CinemaCon season. Kosinski is currently locked into directing Universal's Miami Vice 85, with Michael B. Jordan and Austin Butler set for an August 6th, 2027 release, and he's also attached to an untitled UFO conspiracy thriller over at Apple. Factor in post-production and press for both, plus how long it genuinely takes to shoot practical aerial footage safely, and Kosinski simply isn't available for the next few years, not months. It's worth remembering this franchise has swapped directors before without falling apart. Tony Scott directed the 1986 original, and when Maverick finally arrived decades later, Kosinski took the reins and arguably delivered the strongest film of the three, so losing him isn't automatically a death sentence. The harder thing to replace is his specific approach, insisting on real jets and real G-forces on real actors instead of leaning on visual effects, and finding a filmmaker who can match that discipline while still nailing the emotional beats. Now, here's where the story gets more interesting than most coverage lets on. The assumption online has mostly been that McQuarrie inherits the job automatically, given everything he and Cruise have built together over 2 decades. But the Insider's early May report specifically named McQuarrie as someone not currently in serious contention for the director's chair, and attached a pretty pointed explanation to it. Sourcing suggests the underwhelming box office and critical reception of the 2-part Mission Impossible finale left Cruise reluctant to immediately hand him another massive tentpole. Macquarie is apparently still contributing ideas to Kruger's draft behind the scenes, but word is that's where his involvement stops for now. He's not exactly hurting for work either, with a Conan the Barbarian sequel opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger reportedly on his plate, an early-stage Battlefield adaptation built around Michael B. Jordan, and a handful of other projects with Cruise still cooking, including an original action thriller, a musical, and something centered on the Les Grossman character from Tropic Thunder. With Kosinski and Macquarie both effectively sidelined, the names actually being floated for Top Gun 3 include John M. Chu, fresh off Wicked, Joachim Ronning from Tron Ares, and the directing pair Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah, known for Ms. Marvel and the newest Bad Boys entry. Online fan chatter and a few analysts have thrown out other possibilities too: David Leitch, Brad Bird, Doug Liman, and Edward Zwick, though none of that has any official backing. Bottom line, Paramount still hasn't named a director, and that single vacancy is easily the biggest unresolved question hanging over this entire production. Casting-wise, only one seat on this plane is guaranteed: Cruise himself as Maverick. Miles Teller reprising Rooster and Glenn Powell coming back as Hangman both feel like safe bets given how both actors have talked around the subject publicly without ever fully confirming it. Powell told Horowitz during a live Happy Sad Confused taping at New York's 92nd Street Y that he already had a start date circled on his calendar, then had some fun refusing to actually share it with the crowd. Jay Ellis, who played Payback, checked in with Entertainment Tonight this past May, calling the production's progress baby steps and saying the enthusiasm from Cruise, Bruckheimer, and the studio all feels genuine. Monica Barbaro as Phoenix, Jennifer Connelly as Penny, and John Hamm as Cyclone remain officially unconfirmed, though multiple outlets covering the project have reported the Navy has been pushing this time around for stronger representation of female pilots, a detail that, if accurate, would work in Barbaro's favor specifically. Expect the same Navy and Lockheed Martin consultants who reportedly helped design Maverick's fictional hypersonic Darkstar jet to return in some capacity as well, which should keep whatever aircraft show up next grounded in plausible next-generation military hardware rather than pure fantasy. There's a heavier note running underneath all of this too. Val Kilmer's return as Iceman in Maverick ended up being his final screen performance before he passed away in 2025, and whatever this next script chooses to do with that absence, it's going to land hard on an audience that remembers exactly what that reunion moment meant. Now here's a structural wrinkle in this franchise that barely ever comes up in these breakdowns, and I think it matters more than any casting rumor. Take a real look at both existing films, and neither one actually has a proper antagonist. John Hamm's Vice Admiral Kane in Maverick reads more like an obstacle with a rival philosophy than a genuine villain, and the film spends its whole second act quietly proving him wrong, rather than ever really defeating him. The enemy pilots in both movies barely register as characters at all. Faceless, unnamed, flying for a country the script never bothers naming, without a shred of dialogue or interior life. They're pure target practice. That worked fine both times because something else was doing the emotional heavy lifting instead, pure charisma and soundtrack in the original, and 36 years of pent-up nostalgia plus a genuinely personal grief story in Maverick. Top Gun 3 doesn't get either of those crutches. All that stored up emotional fuel already got spent. If this new film just recycles the same formula, faceless enemy jets, a vague mission, nothing concrete for the audience to actually resent, it risks feeling noticeably thinner than either predecessor. That's precisely why the drone and AI angle circulating around this script has me genuinely intrigued, because it could solve that exact problem without betraying anything the franchise stands for. Several entertainment outlets have reported the new story leans into autonomous combat systems and the argument that unmanned aircraft can already outperform human pilots in a straight fight. None of that is actually new territory for this series either. Back in 2010, Tony Scott himself reportedly developed an earlier version of a sequel built entirely around drones replacing fighter pilots, one that ultimately never got made. Maverick already planted a piece of that same argument through Kane's insistence that drones fly more precisely and put zero lives at risk, countered by Maverick's belief that instinct and improvisation still matter in ways no machine can replicate. If Top Gun 3 finally hands that argument to an actual character, somebody who honestly and rationally believes autonomous systems are the smarter, safer path forward, rather than some cartoonish villain twirling a mustache, that would arguably be the most mature swing this franchise has ever taken. It would keep the series' signature faceless mechanical threat intact while finally giving the human side of that debate somebody worth actually arguing against. As for where the actual characters go from here, Rooster already closed out his arc in Maverick, spending that whole film stepping out from under his dead father's legacy and his complicated bond with Maverick, and finishing it as his own pilot rather than anyone's shadow. That means the next chapter needs something new for him to wrestle with, and the most obvious direction is putting him face to face with what a lifetime of chasing being the best actually cost the man who trained him, then forcing him to decide if that's the life he actually wants for himself. Maverick's own arc mirrors that question from the other side, since his whole identity rests on believing human instinct will always beat cold calculation. Then there's Penny, a thread Maverick opened and never closed, giving him something resembling an actual home for maybe the first time in his life. Whether this next mission genuinely costs him that relationship, or whether the story just lets him keep having it both ways with zero real consequences, is going to say a lot about whether this sequel is brave enough to actually earn its ending instead of coasting on another victory lap. And the franchise is expanding well past movie screens, which brings us to the news that actually got a lot of people talking about Top Gun 3 again recently. Put all of it together and 2028 still looks like the earliest realistic window for this movie to actually hit theaters. There's no finished, greenlit shooting script out there in any real sense yet, no director attached, and no start date for cameras. And Maverick already proved firsthand exactly how long it takes to plan and safely shoot practical aerial photography with real fighter jets pulling real G-forces. Every ingredient that made Maverick work is technically sitting on the table right now. Cruise is committed, Bruckheimer's producing, both credited writers say the story clicked into place fast, and Paramount is clearly willing to spend real money and real Vegas real estate betting on this brand for years to come. The one seat still empty is the director's chair, and until somebody's actually strapped into it, that's the detail that decides whether Top Gun 3 ends up the next Maverick or just another franchise cashing in on a beloved name.